Yeah,
Great.
great. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for showing up when we're all so busy. This is a subject very close to my heart, and I've tried to weave in a few different threads. Yeah, I just really appreciate you all showing up. And my hope is this is the beginning of a conversation because I've probably, look at this, I couldn't access my notes earlier, so I printed them off. So I've probably got about a day's worth of content, and I promise I won't do that to you, but it's just the beginning of some things to start to talk about. And I kind of, I'm so appreciative of the shared wisdom in the room as well, so yeah, let's just start a conversation. And also, I found it quite hard to concentrate on writing this because my dear friend Ed died in a car crash on January the 2nd, and he was an absolute delight. So I'm dedicating this to him. And once I knew that I was going to do it, it was much easier to kind of polish this and to do it kind of in celebration of a really extraordinary human being. He was a delight, and I think you can see from that picture what a delight he was. So his wife and his friends know that you'll be celebrating him with us. So thank you for that. So, my name's Sheena Mackenzie. I'm a counsellor and trauma therapist at St Richard's Hospice. I also was one of the parent carers that answered Cerebra's call for people to complete the questionnaire. I don't know what my neurodivergent status might be. It's complicated. But I spend quite a lot of my time hanging out in neurodivergent spaces, and one of my supervisors is autistic. So as a counsellor, I need to discuss my work with a more experienced therapist, and one of my supervisors is autistic and ADHD. So I really value the voices of people with lived experience, and I'm delighted to have people here today who can speak to that. So I'm going to name the people that we have joining us. So, Sue, could I invite you to unmute and say who you are?
Sure. My name's Sue Davidson. I am a late diagnosed autistic woman and mother to an autistic daughter for whom I'm also her registered carer. I'm also currently processing grief from a traumatic bereavement. And my day job is a business support officer, but I also write and act.
Thank you so much, Sue. It's a delight to have you with us. Thank you. And unfortunately, Fran can't be here. I'm not quite sure. One day we will have her here, and she's an absolute delight, and she's very passionate about neurodivergence, especially in terms of her work and her life. Well, that's kind of everything, isn't it, really? And then Valerie, thank you as well. Would you like to unmute and say who you are?
Yes, I'm Valerie Walsh. I'm a palliative care specialist nurse living in Ireland. And I suppose I have had neurodiversity as an aspect of me for my life, but I have probably gained an understanding of it over the last 30 years. And I am really passionate about this subject and being part of of a, an environment that is open and open to making life as easy and yeah, this is my neurodivergence showing up now, but I'm totally lost for words. But I guess it's something I'm very passionate about, and I live with it, and yeah, that's all I have to say. I've just lost for words.
Valerie, it's great to have you. Thank you so much for speaking to that. It's such a, yeah, I'm just very, very grateful to each of you. And also, I have a message from Fran to say, why can't I join? So I'm just going to message her to check she's gone to the second. Have you gone to the second Zoom link in the email? Sorry, Fran. Have you gone to the second Zoom link in the email? There we go. Okay, so I'm slightly multitasking there, badly. But Valerie, it was really, really great to have you bring yourself in and to kind of speak to the kind of blanking that can happen sometimes, especially when we're put on the spot. So thank you.
Can I do anything to help Fran get in?
I don't know. I don't know if I can send you her number.
Yes, do that.
Okay.
And then great.
Okay. So if I send you her number, then we can help her join. Okay. There we go. Okay, there we go. I've sent you Fran's number, and then I only need to focus on the tech and being with you all. Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to speak a little bit about how we're going to spend our time together. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've understood about the language of neurodivergence. And then I'm going to give you an overview of the Cerebra report, Systems Generated Trauma. And then I've got a case study from a patient I've worked with since 2020, on and off, who has given her full consent to me telling her story. And she is... what's the word for more than glad? She was very, very happy to know that that her story will have an impact on other people, because I think sometimes it can be a lonely road, managing multiple neurodivergencies and a palliative diagnosis. So to tell her story feels like an absolute privilege, and I'm very grateful to her too. And then we'll have a panel discussion, maybe using Luna's story as a jumping off point, but maybe there'll be other things that kind of also activate us. So on the subject of that, please take care of yourself in the ways that work for you. You know, whatever helps, please do that thing. If you need to mute yourself, well, actually, it helps if we're all muted, doesn't it? If you need to turn your video off, if you need to get up and walk around, whatever it is that helps you kind of look after your nervous system, please do that thing. In writing this presentation, reading the Cerebra report, it was really activating to write. You know, it's something that... So my daughter has a diagnosis of PTSD as a direct result of her encounters with primary education. So, you know, that I feel that. So I feel it writing it, I feel it speaking it, and it might be activating for you to hear. And also, there is such a lot of hurt around this. There is such a lot of experience of exclusion and being misunderstood and not being heard. And that might also activate or light up parts of us very much in need of compassion. And we're going to make mistakes. We're really going to make mistakes. And I would like this a place where we can be clumsy and use the wrong words and be met with kindness, because we're all learning. And if we don't make any mistakes, we don't make anything at all. If we try and be perfect, we'll probably just end up being silent, and that's not what community is made of. So also, I will probably get things wrong, and I will probably use words that aren't... reading and kind of going deeply into the literature on this, there's always another perspective, and I think actually multiple perspectives are helpful, because no one perspective can see everything. So if I say something that lands badly, I would also invite you to call me in. So that's my intentions, and that's what I invite you all to do. So I'm just going to remind us of the principles of trauma-informed care. This is from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health something. I don't know what the A stands for, I should do. So we have safety, we have trustworthiness and transparency, we have peer support, we have collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, cultural, historical and gender sensitivity. So these are the principles that we aspire to. And when I tell Luna's story, I'm going to put these in the chat so we can kind of identify the way that being neurodivergent affirming is also in line with trauma-informed principles. And then within that, there is a realization that trauma is widespread and that it affects individuals, families, and communities, and that we are able to recognize, so we can identify the signs, symptoms, and behavioral indications of trauma, not just in our clients and our patients, but also within our colleagues and within ourselves. And having realized that trauma exists, having recognized it when it shows up, we're also able to respond in a way that facilitates healing. And this is the bit that the Cerebra report really speaks to. So we resist re-traumatization. So we actually prevent practices that may trigger or re-traumatize individuals. And there is some very focused fury in the Cerebra report. And I'll get to that, specifically about that final one. So, yeah, I'm not going to jump ahead. I'm going to let the story unfold. I'm also assuming that everybody knows about Oliver McGowan and that everybody has attended that training. So I'm deliberately not repeating any of that content. And if you haven't done that training, please seek it out. It's excellent. So we know that services can cause trauma to disabled people and their family, and we also know that sometimes it leads to their death. So there is a kind of heaviness in the work that we're doing today to kind of acknowledge that. So please, let's look after ourselves. Okay, so this is the bit that activates my tech anxiety. So I'm going to hand over to a neurodivergent rights activist who I think was, some people say 15. I think in this video she says she was 16 or 17 when she came. So I'm just going to see if this works.
Am I mistaken, or was it you that coined the term neurodivergent?
Can you hear that? Yeah, great.
That was me. It was a very long time ago.
Would you like to talk about that?
I can certainly try. So I was really young, I was like 17, 16. And so way back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth. That is not true. We did not have dinosaurs in my day. We had saber-toothed tigers. Yeah, so we had saber-toothed tigers roaming the internet, running free. People were using the word neurotypical as the opposite of autistic, and that's inaccurate. And there's no such thing as a neurotypical person with epilepsy, right? There's no such thing as a neurotypical person with ADD. There's no such thing as a neurotypical person with multiple sclerosis or any of this whole laundry list of things that can be different about your neurology. And that's silly, and I'm a pedantic person, and I hate it. So I started identifying as neurodivergent and multiply neurodivergent after that, because divergence is a neutral term, or at least it should be a neutral term. It's an opposite of typical, and because autistic and typical aren't opposites. What is this, right? And so neurodivergent, neurotypical, that gave us opposites. We have an unmarked state. We don't have an unmarked state anymore, but we also have a way for people to identify if they're neither autistic nor neurotypical. And it also gave us a big honking huge tent, because I want a big tent. I want to be able to caucus with people who are also not neurotypical, but who are not necessarily autistic, because a lot of neurodivergent people have some similar things. It fills a similar role to the former term autistic cousin, but not quite, because there's loads of neurodivergent people who aren't cousins. They're just not neurotypical. Yeah, it fills a different role, and that's for a lot of people, and that's fine. We just needed a word, and someone needed to make it, and I make a good someone, and I'm pedantic, so put pedantry to good use.
So often the term neurodivergent is misattributed to other writers that took that language. Can you hear me okay? And if you haven't yet muted, you might want to, because I think someone else is coming through as well, unless it's just me getting feedback. You're very welcome, and it's good to see you all. So, okay, so I can click on. So there are a lot of different visual ways of representing this. My daughter does not like this representation. She finds it very unclear. So we have neurotypical allistic, which means non-autistic, and then we have autistic, and then we have neurodivergent. Some people use the term neurominority and neuromajority, but if we're being specific about that, actually you can see that neurotypical is not in the majority, not the way this is represented, and not when we have a honking great big tent where we can talk to difference in a way that embraces it and celebrates it. This one's great. This is from Stimpunks, so if you're interested in exploring this more, looking at a strengths-based view of neurodivergence. And I'm not going to dwell on these as long as I would like, just because we're short of time. The slides and the video will be available on the network, so please join if you haven't already, and you can access these great resources yourself. And then this is another visual representation that we're not just talking about being autistic and ADHD. In fact, some people include complex PTSD, all sorts of other differences. And that's a way, I think, there's a kind of solidarity within that. And here we have, it's a non-exhaustive list. And here, Nick Walker, check out his essay on neuroqueering. It's just a very inspiring essay. Never ever use neurodivergent as a euphemism for autistic. If you mean that someone's autistic, say they're autistic. It's not a dirty word. And then there's that comment there that neurominority, but neurotypicality is such a small box. Nick Walker suggests that neuronormativity is a tiny box of normal defined by wealthy white men. And he describes 3 or 4 different ways in which we can become neurodivergent, either through genetics, through illness or injury, through the use of psychedelics, and also through the use of sort of extensive meditation. And what I really like about this lady, she does some great courses, which she also will make free for anyone who gets in touch with her if you are financially stretched. She's Trauma Geek, and she describes how so much of the knowledge and wisdom that we have around neurodivergence comes from the neurodivergent community. Like we heard from Cassian just then, you know, she came up with the phrase neurodivergence because she was in a community that needed to speak to some of these experiences. And then what happens is the academic community catches up and begins to explore ideas that are already out there in the community. So that's a kind of background to sort of a very quick overview of what we mean by neurodivergence. Does anyone have any comments at this point, or anything that doesn't make sense, or anything anyone needs to check? Okay, good. So we're on to Cerebra's report. So systems generated trauma. So this is actually a report on how disabled children and their families are traumatized by dysfunctional public services when they ask for support. What I hope to do is take the huge amount of work that's been done on this and the voices of all those parent carers and just challenge ourselves to apply it to our context within palliative care. So I'm going to read out the introduction. It is a painful truth that many disabled children and their families are being traumatized, not by illness, not by accident, but by the very public services that are meant to help them. This is not a fringe issue. It is not acceptable. It is happening in every corner of our society, and it's breaking people. We call it systems-generated trauma, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So the Cerebra report describes how we have health, we have social care, and we have education systems, and they're complex, and they're dysfunctional, and they're actively harmful. I mean, my guess is this chimes with everyone's experiences here. And rather than talking about re-traumatizing, that actually these institutional systems are themselves the very primary source of the trauma. They're not triggering an old trauma, they are the source of the trauma. And that can be challenging, because we want to be good people, right? We want to work for good institutions. So it's this externalization of trauma, to say the trauma is the bad thing that's happened out there because of interpersonal violence or because of abuse, that it's not anything with which the institution bears any responsibility. So the Cerebra report is challenging institutions and organizations, not just to talk about trauma as being this external thing that happens, but this thing that we may be doing to the people who reach out to us for care. So the source of the trauma being other, and that means the traumatic experience for which the institution bears no responsibility. And one of the things the Cerebra report talks about in the policy documents that local authorities, schools, social care support systems write, talk about accidental traumatization that inadvertently may cause trauma. But I guess the thing is, once you know that the thing that you are doing is traumatizing, then it's no longer accidental, you know. So the trauma that the people in this report reported, the trauma as a result of the systems, they described as having more impact than adverse childhood experiences, than domestic violence, or than mental health difficulties. And Cerebra describes the unwillingness for institutions to act as moral indifference. So Cerebra describes that there are dysfunctional siloed systems, that it's impossible for parent carers to navigate, that often parents are blamed, and the institutions fail to see multiple challenges that are happening at the same time. And Cerebra feels that there are relatively straightforward system adjustments that would change this. And there are just, you know, I would direct you to the report. I know some of you have read it already. It's called Lifelong Trauma for All of Us, especially my autistic son, who as an adult is afraid to seek the help he needs. So I see that in my daughter. I also see it in Luna, who's given me permission to tell her story. And then there's this really fascinating but also dark description of pathogenic vulnerabilities, that these are harms that can arise in many contexts, where the institutional response that's intended to address that vulnerability has the opposite effect and actually increases existing vulnerabilities and creates new ones. So people come with a vulnerability, and then the institution makes those vulnerabilities worse and adds to them. And also to speak that this is political and that we can name it, that some of these harms arise from the way that we've agreed society will work, and that there are policy harms, and that there are choices being made that are causing harm to vulnerable people, vulnerable children. And this was a great quote that I wanted to include. Trauma is not a disorder, but a reaction to a kind of wound. It is a reaction to profoundly injurious events and situations in the real world, and indeed to a world in which people are routinely wounded. A world in which people are routinely wounded. So I know this is heavy to hear, and I just appreciate you all being here and listening to it. So Huni, who is a big member of our network, but I don't think is here today, I think has done work on environmental harms. So, you know, the impact on vulnerable communities of toxicity in the environment. So, for example, we know that people with less money are more likely to live in areas with higher, with poorer air quality, you know, more toxins in the air. I believe that now that it's identified that poor air quality have led to the death of some children in more impoverished areas. So they liken the experience of some people in relationship to some institutions as a kind of slow violence, in the same way that an exposure to environmental toxins. So it's not just one interpersonal act of violence, it's a slow violence that accrues over months and years. That's another quote. "We are not the same people. We are broken and traumatized. We cannot trust anyone anymore." My daughter no longer trusts any adults from organisations to do with health. And Cerebra suggests the loss of trust will be lifelong and potentially intergenerational. But it's not hopeless. And the reason it's not hopeless is that there is the potential for institutional empathy. That we're here today and we are open to hearing this. And if I can get to my notes, I can tell you exactly what this means. Institutional empathy. Okay, we're nearly there. So Cerebra suggests institutional empathy is where the bodies have practitioners who listen, support and respect, in the sense of conveying some sense of understanding how incredibly difficult it can be for families to lead, in inverted commas, ordinary lives. So I'd like to share Luna's story with you. So Luna identifies with many behavioural indicators of autism and ADHD. And I've got about 10 slides that we're not going to get to about diagnoses. What's very interesting about the DSM-4 is most diagnoses in there are people can speak to their own experience. So someone who might be depressed can say that they have a sense of worthlessness and that they feel very low and that things feel very dark, and it's their lived experience that people listen to. Nobody can say to somebody, well, you don't look depressed, because it's their own inner experience that counts. With autism and ADHD, the indicators are behavioural. And one autistic commenter said it's almost as if they are defining autism and ADHD in terms of how much trouble it creates for them, rather than our own experience of challenge. So Luna, I don't know if some of you might have been here for when I did a presentation about internal family systems. Luna, back in 2020, taught me about internal family systems. Not because she knew about internal family systems, but she had such a intuitive and creative and visual sense of her own inner world, and was able to speak about different parts of herself. And I had just begun to learn about IFS, and I was like, oh my goodness. Like the match, the resonance with what Luna was teaching me about herself was so explicit and beautiful. Luna's incredibly compassionate, empathic, and attuned to the world. And she's also experienced significant challenges and delays in accessing a neurodivergent diagnosis. So one palliative care professional, and I feel like out of loyalty to my team, I'm not saying this wouldn't happen with our team, but it wasn't within St. Richard's. One palliative care professional, when she said, I think I'm autistic and ADHD, said, well, do you have a formal diagnosis? And she was like, oh no. And then this person said, oh, well, then it doesn't count. Kind of ignoring the massive waiting lists and the hoops people have to jump through. And if you find paperwork a challenge, it's going to be very, very difficult to access any kind of diagnosis. Even more so if most of your experiences with health professionals have not been positive. You're going to avoid coming into contact with that. Luna was also told by a locum GP, each time you eat, it's feeding your cancer. And Luna didn't eat for nearly a week until another patient alerted hospice staff. And I think that shines a light on one of the trauma-informed principles of peer support. So there's something about that kind of relationship of solidarity and equality that allowed Luna to share that with a peer, that then meant that this could be addressed. So Luna has also experienced multiple traumas, both medical and interpersonal, and she's also a single mother to 3 young neurodivergent young adult children. So that's Luna. We could maybe talk about how to respond to her needs. And I think this next slide is a reminder for me to, no, it's not quite, it's nearly a reminder to me to stop talking. So this is just flagging up all the people I'm grateful to that have informed this work, this presentation. So we have Stimpunks, we have Jenai Elizabeth, Trauma Geek, Kieran Rose, Christy Forbes. She speaks about PDA, which is called pathological demand avoidance, but some people rename persistent drive for autonomy. We have Nick Walker, neuroqueering, Sarah Bergenfield, who's an autistic IFS therapist, and also my supervisor, Jude Cairn, who's autistic and ADHD. And there's a lot of very funny resources out there as well. So I really enjoy the Daily Tism and the Neurotypical Wife, who flips the narrative on neurodivergence. So just to read out that little meme there: signs of neurotypicality: may chit-chat excessively, may use extreme eye contact, may have urgent need to socialize, may interpret your interactions as rude if you do not follow complicated and arbitrary social rules, may display rigid thinking patterns and an inability to understand that there are many ways to communicate, move, and experience this world. And we also have Hannah Gadsby, who I love very much. So Sheena, stop share and stop talking. There we go. So thank you. That is a real whistle stop tour. I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. And move the effects out, and I can see that there's some chats, and I think that's probably people saying hello. You're all very welcome. Thank you for coming. Yeah, great to have you all here. Somebody couldn't hear me. Oh, that's a shame.
There was a problem with Jackie hearing.
I'm sorry to hear that.
If she listens to the recording later, then hopefully she can hear it then. Yeah.
So
thanks for a great presentation. Before you go on to the next bit, that was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So I have ever such a lot of content. Oh, Fran, you're here. How nice to see you. Fran, would you like to say hello and who you are?
Hi, I'm Fran. I've been in the wrong room, go figure. I was in the post meeting, just waiting. I've been there since 12:30, waiting in the wrong room. So I've got ADHD. So yeah, that's me. Sorry. Why did I say that? I don't know.
It's really good to have you, and we could unpick how often people who are neurodivergent have to apologise for being who they are and how they are. That continual need to kind of make things right with the world. And there's some awful statistics, isn't there, about how often ADHD children get corrected compared to their neurotypical peers. And when I say corrected, it's criticised, isn't it? And being made to feel less than and shamed. So it's so good to have you all here. So I spoke a little bit about Luna. I don't know if that kind of brought up any thoughts from anybody here, if there are any questions or how we might respond to Luna. Would anyone like to comment? Maybe from the panel, but maybe not, Oh, I could tell you what I did. Oh, I can see Sue, you've unmuted. Did you want to say something, Sue?
Only that my feeling is that a lot of the ways in which certainly my daughter, and to a lesser extent myself, I've had a couple of bad experiences, but my daughter's had a lot of bad experiences with health professionals, is that it's not because they didn't have a fantastic education about neurodivergence. It's not because they weren't an expert on neurodivergence. That's not the problem. The problem is they didn't meet her with an open mind and empathy and listening and believing. And those, you don't need special training for those things. You shouldn't need special training for those things, I should probably say. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say, was that it's not about being an expert.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that the point is, you're right, that people show up with so much judgment. Curiosity is actually the name of the game. If we could just show up with curiosity without an expectation that there is a standard way of being, things would be so much easier, and if we ego has a huge part to play as well in terms of healthcare professionals. There's this, I don't have it myself, but I kind of sense that one who is in with a professional title needs to know everything, doesn't approach things from a perspective of seeking to understand and checking in with, it does for me seem like the most standard basic: what works for you, when would you like me to contact you again, how would you like me to contact you? They're very small and basic things, but there are policies, there are structures, I'm part of a palliative care service that has a system that perhaps doesn't feel that continuity serves the professionals well, that it may be too emotionally laboring for people to offer continuity, that type of thing. So I suppose just the awareness of how systems aren't necessarily designed to support the people that we care for, and to follow agenda. I suppose that really speaks to me. The policy, how policy limits our ability to show up for people in a compassionate way that's sensitive to their needs, basically. So yeah, they're the things that were coming up for me in the presentation.
Thank you so much, both of you. Arabella, I see that your hand's up.
Hi, thanks, Sheena. Yeah, thanks for everyone who's shared so far. Firstly, thank you so much for putting this on. This is it's like my ikigai, all the things I love and care about all rolled into one title. I was like, I can't miss out on this opportunity to share with you. Whilst I don't work in palliative care, it's always been something I'm very passionate about. So I work as in a sort of clinical support role, supporting people with substance use issues in supported living and residential services. Many of the people we support have learning disabilities, acquired brain injury. So it was really interesting to sort of hear about neurodiversity being the sort of catch-all term it is to sort of describe so many of the people we're supporting. And, I constantly feel like I'm living at the sort of where it's really tricky, the sort of limbo between, in my sort of like voluntary capacity, the stuff that I like to explore or volunteer for is sort of psychedelic harm reduction in music festivals, right? Where most of the volunteers have lived experience, are neurodiverse, and it's incredibly non-judgmental, and we often have incredible outcomes supporting people through periods of psychological crisis. And threshold singing, so like singing with people in either hospice or at end of life, this idea of people coming together, providing this like beautiful relational container, and it's led by the sort of energy and what people want. And then I sit in meetings where I'm discussing with operational colleagues how people are in breach of their terms and conditions of their residency by making like unwise decisions or choosing to do things in a way that they present with behaviors that challenge, and people are ultimately scared, don't know how to meet them and support them, because there's almost like this learned helplessness, like perpetuated by the systems we work in, where our staff are too afraid to either challenge or meet people human to human. The conversations you might have at a bus stop with someone where you share, and you feel like, just give me 5 minutes with this person in a outside of the context of it being like a care system, and you'd see how much let's just give me that opportunity. And I find we live at this nexus where it's emotionally exhausting, and having ADHD myself, you want to fix all the problems at once, and you realize it's just this slow uphill struggle. So we're sort of in there with them, but naming it and having like colleagues that you can, I don't know, reflect on these challenges with can often be it's hard to do. So I'm just really grateful for this space to listen and share with you all the sort of struggles we're all probably coping with at the moment. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Arabella. So from everyone who's spoken so far, it seems to come back to compassion and humility. And I think Arabella used the phrase like relational container, of like, can we just listen to people? You know, it's not about becoming an expert. In fact, I have a quote from my daughter from one of the later slides, that somebody from a specialist school came round to speak with her, and she said that she was an expert in autism. So already, you know, my daughter was like, okay. And also my daughter knew that she was charging £400 for the hour's visit. And my daughter doesn't enjoy person first language, as a lot of autistic people don't. So for my daughter, it feels really important that as an autistic person, that's a kind of integral who she is. It's not an accessory that she carries outside of herself. It's kind of core to her experience of the world. And then this lady just repeatedly used you're someone with autism, and you could just see my daughter just like folding her arms, and like just the kind of lack of kind of attunement, and also humility to know that she doesn't know what language. Some autistic people do prefer to be described as someone with autism, so there's no right or wrong, but knowing that there is difference in how people use language, and being sensitive enough to check with someone about what kind of language is right for them, and not telling them they're wrong if the language they use is different. So what my daughter had to say, if she hadn't called herself an expert, her mistakes wouldn't have been so jarring. It would be fine from a nice lady in the shops, but not from someone who's calling themselves an expert. I find it's really important not to think you understand the inner workings of an autistic person just because you've done your research on how our brains work. If you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And I think that kind of speaks to what many of you have said. My daughter's also hilarious. And woe betide a professional come into her house. And Anne says, is there something about open-mindedness, acceptance and appreciation for people who they are? Absolutely. And when I share the bigger stack of slides, there's a whole section I've included here in terms of cultural humility, about like, let's just attune to the person in front of us, and listen to what's going to work for them, and not be running according to the expectations of our institution, and instead can we be creative, can we be connecting? I think that's what Sue and Valerie and Arabella have spoken to.
I think even sometimes the environments we work in are so unfriendly to people with neurodiversity, even in terms of the lighting, the activity. You know, if you're in a hospital environment, for example, the amount of, you know, beeping noises, rapidly changing environment, that type of thing. You know, I recently had a patient who has a husband with autism and 2 autistic children, and as they were referred to us, he was been described as the most difficult man they had ever met in the hospital. So on that basis, it was deemed that I should meet him at the hospice, and my experience of the situation was utterly different, you know, and I could hear and receive and understand so completely how antagonistic the environment in the hospital was to him, and how challenging it was for him to navigate. And, you know, he was arriving with the label, but the experience we've shared has been utterly different. And it just, for me, was kind of a testament to the fact that we really just need to show up with unconditional love and acceptance and openness, and you know, receptivity to people in their very unique way and the challenges that they're encountering. I love your daughter's quote there about to have met one autistic person is to have met one autistic person. It's everything, isn't it?
Fran, you look like you maybe wanted to come in, or did I misread that?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't tell you anything about myself earlier because I'm just so nervous. It's just I just get my brain just stops working. Sorry. Yeah, I work in. I'm a substance misuse worker, and I work in a men's prison. So you can imagine what the guys are up against. You know, it's kind of like this system that's very punitive, and it's just like, well, why aren't they like me? I know that I went to school with that kid, and I didn't turn up like him. You know, I've had a great life, and I've done this, and I've done, and it's just like they not only do they wear black and white, but they just think in black and white, and it's just, you know, you have to turn up and sort of like be their interpreter for your client. You're there to interpret what they want to say to the officers, and get the officers to kind of like understand how to understand these people, you know. And it's just, and again, going back to what Valerie was saying about all the noises and the lighting and the, you know, the noise in a prison. I don't know whether anybody else works in a prison, but it's horrendous. You know, I often walk around with my loop things in because I just can't stand the noise myself, and I can go out and go into a quiet space, you know, every couple of hours, but to be in that 24/7, you know, with people kicking and banging and shouting and everything that's going on 24/7, it's just horrendous. And then obviously to be within an environment that it's just nobody understands you. It's and you just feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall, really, as a practitioner there. And also, I remember feeling very ashamed to tell anyone I had ADHD. I just didn't want to mention that at all to anyone. And I only got diagnosed last year, by the way. So, and I just thought, oh, I'm not going to say that because I know for a fact everyone's going to say, oh, one of the, everyone's got ADHD these days, haven't they? And I just couldn't bear to hear that sort of like dialogue that just exists out there. So I don't really tell officers, I don't tell staff, because I feel like, you know, it's just it just goes against you. But I do tell the clients when I'm on a one-to-one, if I feel like that's helpful to them. And just, you know, the change in somebody when they feel like they're being heard and understood, it's just a complete 360 turnaround, you know, in the way that you can engage with somebody then, when they feel like you're going to be able to talk their language or even just understand their language, you know, their behaviours and what those behaviours mean. And so yeah, it's but what we're trying to do now, because I bang on and on and on and on about it, they've just got sick of me, really, and they've said, give her a bloody room. So they've given me a room, the clients a room, so we've got like a sensory room in there, and I'm just about to start some auricular acupuncture for the neurodiverse guys. And I'm scared to use that word now because I'm just thinking, you know, what's people's interpretation about it? I don't want to offend anybody or anything like that, but you know, but in a prison system, that's what we say. So yeah, so we're just trying to see if we can do any small changes as best we can to help these guys, you know, in any way we can, really. But we're just sort of like at the tip of the iceberg at the moment. So hopefully this will grow and become something a bit more, sort of like a bit more of a supportive environment.
Fran, it's so good to have you speak to all of that, about the stigma and the shame, and about the way some people are judged against neurotypical standards. So I was okay, why can't you be okay in this environment? And there's a comment in the chat there. So Becky's saying, always think about the environment and circumstances of the hospice, hyper-stimulating, and sometimes until it becomes a new familiar. And I know, Fran, you've also had experiences at St. Richard's as well. And then we have another comment from Sue. Thank you, Sue. None of us enjoy having assumptions made about us, but when people have been making often harmful assumptions made about us all our lives, it can be incredibly frustrating, especially when it comes to people in caring professions. My daughter will often shut down during such interactions, which results in her needs not being met. Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if my pedantic part might be welcome, Fran, about language. Would it be okay to say a little bit about that? Because I know sometimes some neurodivergent people can feel alienated when we might misuse language. So would it be okay if I spoke to that? Because I think sometimes, like, we do feel afraid. Like, am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I going to be further shamed? Am I going to be kicked out of the tribe here for using the wrong words? Or will I say, like, with my daughter, you know, it was so easy for that expert in autism just to completely shut her down straight away by using the wrong language. And also, we can't always get it right, but we can approach it with that kindness and that responsiveness and that kind of curiosity we've spoken about. But just one very quick thing. So neurodiversity is everyone. So neurodiversity is the whole human race. Neurotypical people and that honking huge tent. Neurodivergent is when we fall outside of that box as defined by, bye Harriet, thanks for coming, and the recording will be available. Thanks for saying. So neurodiversity is everyone, including the honking huge tent and including neurotypical people. And then neurodivergent is anyone who falls out that very small box of normal as defined in Nick Walker's terms by wealthy white men. In fact, some people, I think Elizabeth Janet has even suggested that being menopausal would count as being neurodivergent. You know, so the brain fog, you know, all those kind of experiences that women experience in menopause may also fall out of a box of neurotypicality, and it's a very small box and it's really hard to exist in there. So I think there's a term, neuroqueering, which let me see if I can get this right. So neurodivergent traits are human traits, so we all need to be heard, we all need to be listened to, and we, you know, many of us will have sensory needs that aren't met within our environment. So if we can create an environment that responds to neurodivergent people with vulnerabilities, that actually makes things better for everyone. So what's helpful for neurodivergent individuals actually makes life better for everyone. In the same way that when we apply trauma-informed principles within a universal precautions approach, you know, we just assume everyone has trauma because this is a wounding world that we live in. That makes life better for everyone. And it doesn't necessarily cost anymore. It just means we get curious, like, how can we help? And I think that's why often hospice values and trauma-informed values and neuro-affirming values, you know, it's so easy to kind of see an alignment. You know, we're already doing so much of this, but we do need to kind of acknowledge that it's there. And I think what is very sobering and heavy about the Cerebra report is that we also need to acknowledge that not only do we re-traumatize families who've had those experiences detailed in the Cerebra report, but it's also possible that we will also cause further trauma. You know, that kind of really kind of pathogenic vulnerability. You know, that simply by putting your hand up and asking for help and not falling within that tiny box of what is perceived as normal actually makes you more vulnerable. And by naming it and talking about it here and trying to speak to the complexity of that, I think makes it hopefully less likely that we will do that. But it's a work in progress, isn't it? Sorry, it sounds like it's the end, but we've still got half an hour, so I didn't mean to do that. Do people have more thoughts? Any questions? Would it be helpful if I talked a little bit? I've got some slides on language. Would that be helpful? Okay. So let me see if I can get to the slides first. I've got the big sign up that says stop talking. Okay, so escape. Okay, so share. Okay, share. Okay, from current slide. Okay. From current slide. There we go. So this was, because originally this was a presentation that my daughter and I did together, and I don't know if you know, there's a song called If I Were a Fish, and the chorus is, why is everyone so mean on the internet? And it's, I think a lot of people feel worried about using the wrong language. And so these are some things to think about. So people first language versus identity first language. There's not a right and wrong, but a lot of autistic people prefer identity first language, which would be autistic person rather than person with autism. We know neurotypical. Allistic means someone who's not autistic. Asperger's. So a lot of people who were diagnosed a long time ago would use that language, and that would feel completely right for them. Later diagnosed people wouldn't be given that diagnosis, and there is a lot of kind of there's a lot of pain, I think, in the community around that, partly because of Asperger's association with the Nazis. There is a great book called Neurotribes, which speaks a little bit of this, but I think since that book was published, more has come out about the way that Asperger in some ways protected some children, but in other ways experimented on them, and was very much in collaboration with the Nazis. So it is a very hot topic, and at the same time I've seen people be shamed for identifying as Asperger's, and I think if it's their identity and they choose to use it, then we respect that. It's not our role to tell people that their identity is wrong, but there is some fights on the internet about that. And I think the other reason there is some hurt around that is the same reason, maybe I've said this, no I haven't, is about the high functioning and low functioning labels. So there is one suggestion that when we say high functioning autism, what happens is that people only see our strengths and don't see our needs. And likewise, when we use the language of low functioning, all people see are the needs and not people's strengths. So either way, we're not seeing the whole person. There's also a suggestion within the community that when people use terms like Asperger's or high functioning, that there is some attempt to kind of separate themselves from the wider community, to say, oh, I'm not like those people, because we know there's a lot of shame about being different. And yeah, there is just so much hurt there. And when we talk about ADHD, I saw a great commentary on even the title of this, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, that in a way, going back to ADHD and autism, are diagnosed according to behavioural indicators, not according to people's inner experience of themselves. It's almost as if we're describing it firstly as a disorder, not as a condition. And secondly, we're describing it in terms of how other people may experience that as problematic for them, not in terms of, rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is such a common experience of ADHD that it may well end up being diagnostic. It isn't yet. But again, it's like the knowledge is coming from the community to the academics, not the other way around. The community knows itself and is having these discussions, and sometimes those discussions are quite painful. Rebecca, I just saw you put a dot there. Did that mean you wanted to say something?
No. Sorry.
It's okay.
I don't know what I did even. Where is the dot?
You had a little dot came on here, and I was like, "Oh, that's really clever."
It was like love. It was just
yeah. There we go. I'll take it. I'll
great.
take it.
Yeah.
High functioning, low functioning, neurodiversity. We talked about neurodivergency, neurominority. We've talked about neuronormativity. You know, that sense of like, can we define normal? So there's a sense that diversity is strength, and there is this suggestion when you look at the diaspora, so people who have travelled beyond their community, you know, that you can track that, and the suggestion is that people who wanted to explore beyond that mountain and the next mountain and the next mountain were more likely to carry the collection of genes that would elicit an expression of ADHD traits and qualities. So there's something about explorers and people who have the curiosity to keep looking versus the people who would stay within their village, within their tribe, in the same place. So we need diversity, we need neurodiversity to survive as a species. We need people with different strengths, and the idea that there's one normal, a healthy type of brain, or one right style of neurocognitive functioning. So this is Nick Walker, is a culturally constructed fiction, no more valid and no more conducive to a healthy society or to the overall well-being of humanity than the idea there was one normal or right ethnicity, gender or culture, which I just think is it's kind of inspiring once you get into it. Oh yeah, here we go. This is why my daughter doesn't like people first language. So my daughter says that she excels with autism. So we've got suffers from autism, on the spectrum, person with autism, and then autistic person. So that's why some people prefer it. But again, there's no right or wrong. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So the social dynamics that occur in relation to neurodiversity, so neurodiversity, right, that's everyone, is similar in relation to the social dynamics with other forms of human diversity, so ethnicity, gender and culture. So if we look at the final principle of trauma-informed working, trauma-informed working takes in a sensitivity to historical, social, cultural, gender issues. And these dynamics are embedded within social power inequalities. And if we exclude diversity as a healthy expression of what it means to be a human being, we're also missing out on all those wonderful qualities that Luna brings to the people that she comes into contact at the hospice, to the relationship she forms with her peers at the Living Well Centre. You know, that if we can create ways that people can be accepted and embraced, and they don't need to continually apologise for who they are and the way they are, it's better for everyone, because we get to benefit from their company. Okay, so I will stop sharing. I think, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll stop sharing. That's enough about language for now. Okay. 5 new comments. So people have to leave. Yeah, it's getting past lunchtime, isn't it? And people are going to check out the Cerebra report. Yeah. Good. Okay. Any other comments on what I've been saying? Oh, Jeanette, you've got your hand up. Hello.
Just a question, really. You mentioned about psychedelics being a factor sometimes, and I wondered if you could say more about that.
Probably you could say more about that, but I don't know if any of you saw Jeanette's presentation on psychedelics. It was absolutely wonderful. I guess it's about stepping out of that, I guess, quite constrained way of existing in the world that often people who have meditated, I can probably speak more to the fourth one, which is people who've meditated for a long time. Oh, bye, Becky. Thanks for coming. Thanks for everyone for coming. Okay, so Maslow, self-actualization. I guess we're all familiar with that kind of pyramid. And a lot of people have said that if you were to hang out with someone who was truly self-actualized, it would probably be quite an uncomfortable experience because of the unwillingness to follow socially determined rules about how we're meant to behave. That was when someone is like really free, and maybe that happens through meditation, maybe it happens through psychedelics. You know, sometimes those changes can be very, very positive, and they're more likely to follow an inner compass. I'm just making this up, by the way.
I wanted to know, what you think, yeah.
So more likely to follow kind of an inner compass of like compassion and courage and clarity and kind of playfulness, rather than necessarily following social rules about how we're expected to behave. And sometimes people get punished for that.
Yeah.
Does that answer that? And also I would direct everyone to watch your presentation on psychedelics, because it was wonderful.
Thank you. No, that's great. That's helpful. Thank you.
Arabella.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to comment as well because I've also, I attended that talk. It was just absolutely fascinating, and like you, I've been training in holotropic breathwork practitioner training, and really, I've benefited from ayahuasca in ceremony with 7 other veterans with PTSD, and like have really, I've lived that. I'm in that period of integration, like life after psychedelics, and this idea of having, I think it's Robin Carhart Harris who talks about the default mode network. We have these deeply entrenched ways of thinking, and what psychedelics can do, or breathwork practice or meditation, it's like shaking the snow globe and letting things sort of resettle. So I really love that terminology, and talking about self-actualization as well, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs is some really fascinating. He did some work with I think he is the Blackfoot tribe, so an indigenous community, and so they had a hierarchy of needs, but self-actualization was actually at the bottom. So within some of these more sort of traditional cultures, like it was self-actualization, then community actualization, and then at the top was cultural perpetuity. So what Maslow's done is essentially flipped it, saying that we can achieve this here only if we get these bits right. But actually what indigenous tribes do that have a more sort of in his research, you realize that they were happier, they had less, but there was greater sort of this idea of like a relational container. People had roles, whereas in Western culture was far more focused on like the individual, but they prioritized this idea of sort of self-actualization at the bottom, which is really, really fascinating. And I just encourage anybody to just Google Blackfoot tribe and Maslow, and it completely makes you think about, this is what we want, this is what would be amazing to see within our own organizations and institutions, but it's a complete shift of mindset. It's absolutely fascinating. Thank you. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you, Arabella. Yeah, it is fascinating. So I see Jason also has his hand
Sheena,
up.
and before Jason put his hand up, Sue had a comment in the chat that she wanted to say something. I don't know, Sue, I don't know if you wanted to raise your hand but didn't. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, just wanted to say something about how difficult it can be to complain or question or criticize professionals who we're trying to get our needs met by, because the fear of being treated differently, adversely afterwards, it is not an unfounded fear. It comes from experience. So if a professional shows humility and says, it's okay to question me, it's okay to challenge me, it's okay to correct something that I say, that's an incredibly powerful thing. And I can count on one finger the number of professionals who've ever said that to me or my daughter. So, just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Sue. And to pull out some of the detail from the Cerebra report that kind of backs up exactly what you're saying, it's actually very chilling. So I'm just going to read out something here. Fabricated illness. So I think it used to be called Munchausen's by proxy. There were many parent carers who made complaints, were then accused of fabricated and induced illness. Most FII accusations, over 80%, either resulted in no follow-up action. Either resulted in no follow-up action or was subsequently abandoned. Although most allegations were made by healthcare practitioners, significant numbers were made by social workers and by school. Half of all the FIA allegations in the research sample had been made after a parent carer had complained about the actions of the relevant public body. So if you make a loud noise, there will be counter allegations made about you, and that safeguarding allegation will remain on your file forever. And the trauma that it has had on parent carers, it doesn't go away. And I hope people find healing with that. I hope they are able to access a neuro-affirming trauma therapy to address that. So that fear of making a complaint, I think, is very valid and real. Thank you, Sue. Jason.
Thank you, Sheena. It's a really interesting conversation for me, both personally and professionally. In my day job, I'm the head of safeguarding for the charity Marie Curie, and your previous comments are a nice link actually to what I was just going to reflect on today. We are doing some work around, I am, with our safeguarding community of practice around trauma-informed safeguarding. So we focus lots on data because data is very important, but we all know that doesn't tell the whole story. And so the data doesn't tell us when my bosses are asking me if I think there's under-reporting of safeguarding in some areas. What it doesn't tell us is A, is there really? And B, why might that be? And some of the research out there's limited research, but some of it out there was a larger scale piece of research done with members of staff who'd experienced domestic abuse themselves. And so, what I'm keen to think about is how does trauma experience prevent people from raising safeguarding concerns? When I say people, I mean health and social care professionals.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to share, some of that research with people who've experienced domestic abuse. Said that trauma experienced staff often have higher emotional burden. They will have more fear of consequences. They might have more concerns about judgment, more complicated relationships with disclosure, and more complicated relationships with support, which I just thought was interesting in threads through some of this conversation today. Thank you.
That's such a valuable comment, Jason. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Yeah. I'm just going to have a little cough. Excuse me. Excuse me, sorry. Angela, I see your hands up.
Yes, Jason, I would be very interested in that research. If that's published research, then that would be great if you could pop that in the chat. But yes, I wholeheartedly agree with some of what you were just saying about staff's experience, really, of encountering different patients with different levels of trauma and different experiences what they do with that information and how supported they are, that they may need different types of support to help them hold a lot of distress that they encounter. Actually, I'm just really going to, I put a comment in the chat just about, I work in a renal unit, so I'm working with a lot of patients who have quite a lot of invasive treatment and quite a bit of end-of-life care as well. But I also am a parent carer. My daughter's now 20. She has severe learning disability and autism, and she's very medically complex, so we have lots of time in and out of hospitals. I guess there are two things. I guess from my professional thing, I totally agree with what you said about we are re-traumatizing patients. And I do feel that certainly on the renal unit, it's something that's really difficult for staff because they're constantly having to give patients dialysis, very invasive types of procedures in order to enable treatment to happen, same as hospice, I imagine. Well, anyway, it feels really difficult for staff. There's lots of moral injury, I think, and that means that sometimes staff just disconnect from the trauma that's being presented to them. And we've been thinking quite a lot in our team. I'm a counsellor, I work in a team of counsellors and psychotherapists, about how we can support staff really to enable them to hear what's happening for patients. But I think quite a lot of them are disconnected and dissociated actually when people present with distress. And that might be because of their own distress, but I think it's also to do with the fact that they're being forced to cause harm and pain, and how they manage that. So yeah, and I guess from the other side, I just wanted to flag up the issue that probably some of you, particularly that are parents, will know about, which is that Cerebra report was very chilling. I would use that word as well. And it left me, just confirming something that I've experienced, which is there are some wonderful medical professionals out there, but I am a fierce advocate. I'm one of those nightmare parents that just always ask lots of questions. And I feel that the fact that when my daughter was 18, I completely lost parental responsibility for her. And it's expensive and not very easy to get the Court of Protection to grant you. It's gone out of my head, the name of it. But anyway, there is a good petition. I don't know what it's called, but there's basically a group of parents who are fighting for the government to reconsider at 18 losing parental responsibility, because I know there are many doctors that will have already made decisions about my daughter's healthcare without me being there, fully involved, knowing her history. I know that some of the decisions they would have made would not have been right for her. So that's one of the things that keeps me up at night, is what happens when I'm not here really to do that level of advocacy. And I'm sure that that's a real worry for a lot of parents, I think. Anyway, I said that. Thank you for that link, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. So there's two threads in that, isn't there? And I know that Andy Schwab, who was hoping to be here, has done a lot of work about working with family members of patients, so where someone has learning difficulties or is neurodivergent and their carer is dying at the hospice, and it's such a shame that he couldn't be here to speak to that, about the weight of knowing that in a system that is as wounding as it is, vulnerable people need advocates, and that's a heavy thing to carry, and thank you for naming it. Yeah.
Can I add something? Just very quickly, and that is that, we had a very, very brilliant site manager here who had both an adult an adult with severe learning disability who was dying on our ward, and his mum was admitted to hospital, and they arranged for them to be on the same ward. The site manager somehow just did that, knew that they were in the bays next to each other, so mum could actually come in and actually was able to be with him in hospital, even though she was very unwell herself. And I was just so heartened by that actually people in the midst of everything, with all the pressures, that was being thought about. And he had a good death with his mum with him, which is wonderful.
That's beautiful. It's actually given me goosebumps. Yeah, what creativity and compassion can achieve. It's very moving. There were two things in what you spoke about, Angela. First was about the heart wish to always be there to advocate for your daughter. And then the other element was the moral injury staff experience, that in order to do their jobs, there is some level of needing to cut off from the suffering that they are part of. There is a really, really helpful screening tool called the Professional Quality of Life Scale. Do you know it? So it was designed by a charity for that supports survivors of torture. And they needed to find a way to help their staff monitor for signs of compassion fatigue and burnout. And it's just like one sheet of A4, but what it does is it identifies different symptoms of compassion fatigue and burnout. And actually, one of the things that the working group we've been talking about is hand washing for the mind. So, we wash our hands, don't we, from patient to patient, but how do we take care of ourselves in terms of the impact of the suffering that we witness? And I know that this is kind of going away from neurodivergence a little, but in terms of staff who care for patients with fungating wounds, who have witnessed catastrophic bleeds, and often there is a trauma burden that's carried into the next time that they attend to a patient, and there's something, I think, just to name it, it's very visceral in terms of smell. And the way that can actually create a trauma response. And we know one of the trauma responses is avoidance, that we choose not to go and make that emotional connection, and people can feel that. So at some point at a later date, we're going to talk some more about that. I have an OT possibly who might want to talk about the impact of kind of moral injury. And it's not just vicarious trauma, is it? It's actually primary trauma when we witness some things. So there's moral injury, there's primary trauma, and then there's vicarious or secondary trauma. And we're carrying all of that, and those burdens close our heart and makes us less creative, less playful, less willing to find a solution that you described of placing two people side by side in a bed so that there can be a good death. Oh, I've spoken loads, I didn't mean to. Would anybody like to make any further comments or questions before we close?
Can I add something? As I come through, yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, I'm not used to speaking in groups. I feel aware. Anyway, one thing that's coming up for me today, this has been so amazing, really, really beautiful meeting, is the kind of how to keep things flexible and how to keep things open. Is like, how are we feeling today, or in this appointment? Is this desire to get everything fixed and put on the, logged on the sheets and in the boxes, like you say, that small quiet box of normality, if that even exists. But it's kind of, with my clients, I'm always trying to open up all their wonderfulness. and that's when things come through, and that's where, the compassion starts regenerating and is relational, and it's a lovely space to be. And I find in a lot of clinical environments, for myself, for my children and my clients, it's that trying to fix everything, pin it down. It really, really, it never helps. I've been really thinking during us getting together today, the language around that, about keeping that flexibility of how we're feeling right now, not like hold it down. So I'm so grateful that everyone's here and I've joined you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for coming off mute and sharing your thoughts. It's really good to have community and connection. It's about relationship, that's what you're saying. Sorry, I've got a frog. Valerie, and my cat's joined us. I'm just going to cough, but Valerie, it looked like you wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to say that I don't think you need to apologise for talking. I've so enjoyed everything you've had to say. It's been such a rich presentation, and it's such a worthwhile conversation. And I just want to say I'm really grateful for you.
I'm really grateful to all of you, and especially our panel. Thank you, everyone. I believe the recording.
And you as well. I just wanted to say as well, thank you so much for an amazing meeting. You and everybody who's participated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
And there's just a final comment from Sue. Thanks, Ian. My ability to cope with various sensory and emotional stimuli definitely fluctuates, so checking in with that is great. Oh, Sue, we didn't even talk about like fluctuating. Yeah. And the judgment that is made on people. Oh, you could do that yesterday, but you can't do it today. Like, yeah. There's like really we could do with a day together, couldn't we? Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And we need to advertise something, don't we? Rebecca, can you help me with the advert?
Of course I can help you.
Thank you.
Yes, so our next Community of Practice meeting is going to be on Wednesday, the 4th of March at the usual time, 1:00. And I think it's actually something that will interest the people who've come here today. It's going to be presented by Sean Qureshi, who is a palliative doctor and who completed a Churchill Fellowship in 2023. Or he went to the US to look at trauma-informed palliative care for people experiencing marginalization. So in particular, people experiencing homelessness, in people in prison, people who with overlapping structural vulnerabilities, including people who use drugs and people living with severe and persistent mental illness or illnesses. So he's going to be presenting sort of his report just came out recently, and he's going to be presenting insights from that report. So I think it will be really interesting. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll hopefully see you at the next Community of Practice. Thanks for all your contributions. It's so appreciated. Thanks for spending time with us.
Bye.
Thanks for the community.
Take care.
Take care. Bye now. Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.